Well, I want to welcome everyone today for the celebration of Philip Cowdin's wonderful life. He's with us here in spirit today. He would love being here in this space that's been developed by different architects of the Apple stores. And of course, all of you knew Philip's interest in architecture, and he loves space. But on behalf of the family, I want to welcome you here today. And Philip's family, here today, Joan, of course, Sylvia Cowdin, his sister, Michael Cowdin, his brother, his nieces and nephews are here today. And from the standpoint of a loving family, Philip was born in Fort Worth, Texas on November 23rd, 1939 to Hugh P. and Zora Cowdin. He graduated from many of you all not from Fort Worth would know, but Pascal High School and Texas Wesleyan University. He became the personification of a Renaissance man in the 20th century. He was ever curious about all aspects of creative life: art, music, architecture, and furniture design. And while he possessed wonderful talents in each of those areas, his greatest gift was in the design of three-dimensional spaces. That gift led to his long career as a residential designer and builder in Houston. Because of his sensitive collaboration with clients, each residence Philip created or redesigned was a uniquely beautiful addition to its surrounding neighborhood. His talent was in the design of homes of wonderful proportions and scale, as well as homes defined by an easy and immediately inviting flow with its interior spaces. From the first stroke until the final touches, the whole of the creative process was always carefully considered and gave evidence to his abilities of materializing any of his visions. His sense of aesthetics proved essential to all his creative work in both the selection of materials as well as the craftsmanship provided by not only himself but also by the subcontractors he selected and employed. His sense of style arose from a vast knowledge of both contemporary as well as classical art and architectural sources, and his works incorporated not only concrete but also ethereal elements of his great social and historical discernment. The tangible expression of his artistic nature would show in dramatic statements in his designs, making the spaces both unique and unifying. Philip was an avid reader, an original and critical thinker, as well as an astute observer of the political and cultural climate in which he lived. He also was a lively storyteller and capable of truly captivating the people in his presence. His interest in painting led him to take classes at the Glassell School of Art, Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, Texas, and his vivid compositions are now a lasting legacy to his loved ones. For many years, he also studied classical music or classical piano with Edward Pesch, and was a member of the Pesch Pack, a group of aficionados who gave recitals and subsequently celebrated. His deep passion for music also made him open his acoustically alive home to host several concerts by talented opera singers and musicians alike. Philip's career in design led him to become a member of the Rice Design Alliance. He was a board member of Chamber Music Houston and a member of the Legacy Society of the Houston Symphony and the Laureate Society of the Houston Grand Opera. Apart from being a creative soul with a sense of humor, Philip was also an incredibly emphatic personality who received great admiration by his family and peers for his caring and sensitive demeanor. He was both an artistic and personal mentor as well as a father figure to opera singer Adam Fronston at a critical point in his formative years. Philip's and Joan's devotion to Adam never ceased, and thanks to them, Adam not only gained a professional career in his field through their patronage, but also essential additions to his parental family. Above all, Philip was a consummate companion to his wife, Joan, with whom he shared an unbreakable union for 37 illustrious years, a union formed by countless adventures in life and love, leading two strong minds to one powerful presence. Philip was deeply loved and will be deeply missed by all he touched. Philip was predeceased by his parents and his son, Christopher H.P. Cowdin, who inherited his father's creative gifts for drawing and design. He is survived by his wife, Joan, Sylvia Fisher, his sister, Pat, her husband, his brother Michael P. Cowdin, all of Fort Worth, 17 nieces and nephews, 16 grandnieces and grandnephews, and many loving relatives and friends. And now we will have music that's in the program, and all the music has been selected by Philip, and so we'll begin. Thank you. Erica, next, friends. Good. The music was selected by Phil, and I think it's just simply just wonderful. Again, my name is Bill Lawrence, and I get to say a few words about Philip. Little did I know that Philip would become a lifelong friend who would bring me much joy, inspiration, and fun, as I'm sure he has to you. I've known Philip and his family practically all my life. They lived across the street from us in Fort Worth before Philip and I were allowed across the street. We would sit on the curb and talk to each other from across the street. He was 3 years older, so we didn't run around together, but I knew he was cool. I've spoken with several of his childhood friends in the past weeks. They remember him as being a good friend, popular, engaging, known for his art and craftsmanship, and being into ski boats, motorcycles, and fast cars. I learned that he helped form the drag club, the Dukes, and that he designed the plaque that hung from the back bumper of their cars. In his late teens, he started to play the piano. Hearing him play the piano in his home here in Houston always reminded me of the days when our neighbors left their doors and windows open, and I could hear him practicing. We always stayed in touch. We were even roommates in Houston in the late 60s. Thank goodness there was no social media. I experienced firsthand his charismatic personality, his intellectual curiosity, and his remarkable ability to recall seemingly everything he'd ever read. He was a marvelous conversationalist. He especially enjoyed talking about politics and other timely events. He loved to entertain. I also enjoyed, this is before Joan, of course, some of his girlfriends and dates and fun like that too. The stories we could tell, but we can't. When I learned that Joan was going to have this streamed, I cut about 90% of what I was going to tell you about Philip. Philip had many accomplishments, especially the home that he and Joan designed and built. My wife and I refer to it as the Stradivarius. For us, it represents the best example of his extraordinary standard of excellence. The model of it, which he made, is here today. And a couple of side points. One day I was at Philip's, and he got so excited when he was finishing this kitchen, and he showed me a fitting that most of us might just go to Home Depot and buy. Philip had wanted this particular fitting, he said, ever since he had seen it somewhere, but he couldn't find it. And I don't know, and I'm not going to let the facts get in the way of a good story, but he said that he had found it in some catalog from Switzerland or somewhere and ordered it. And so I wasn't sure about it, but I asked about it, and Sean Cowdin, his nephew, sent me this very explicit detail describing the fitting, much more than we have time today, but I'll let you talk to Sean about it afterwards. But it just showed the degree of attention Philip paid to design. And then his close friend Steve McGee told me, who, I don't know if any of y'all have ever had breakfast with a friend for 35 years every Saturday morning, but Steve and Philip did when they were in town. And Steve refers to Philip's kitchen as a Swiss watch, which I think really sort of says about the whole house like that. Philip certainly loved life. Several years ago, when he had pulmonary fibrosis, he bravely carried on to sustain the wonderful life that he and Joan shared. Fittingly, according to Joan, he was placed on the list to get a new lung on Beethoven's birthday. Don't try to find Beethoven's birthday, by the way. And received his new lung on Bach's birthday. And I'm going to leave that up to you all to decide if it was the 31st or the 21st, okay? While visiting Philip in the hospital this past January, we asked him how he wanted to be remembered and what lesson about life he wanted to leave us with. He said that dying was hard. He went on to say that he thought he had died during the night, and he thought to himself, maybe I can just sneak into heaven. Well, he wanted to be remembered as a glorious, witty man, which he certainly was. Yeah, right. Yeah. Michael.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Joan and Philip's nephew on her side of the family. My name is Michael Brucus, and I'm joined here today by all of my immediate family, many relatives, my wife Robin and her daughter Muriel. In thinking about how to eulogize Philip, I concluded it was my job as the neuroscientist to focus here today on his beautiful mind, which in my view is the key that unlocks one's personhood. I was fortunate enough to meet Philip at the young age of a first grader when I lived in Germany. Joan and Philip came to have their marriage blessed, had a reception in a castle, travel on their honeymoon, and visit our family when my dad was stationed there. My wife Robin and I later emulated them with our own magical European wedding and honeymoon. When they visited us in southwest Germany, my sister was in the 4th grade and my brother Matthew was a small baby. This was actually the first time for many of us to have an opportunity to meet Philip. And I distinctly remember 2 things about those days back in 1985. For one, my sister and I giggling every time Joan and Philip would make out incessantly on this leather sofa. They literally couldn't keep their hands off one another. We joked about it for years, my teasing father mocking their expressive love, bantering them for years after in this regard. The other thing I clearly remember was how immediately engaged he was towards me. Like few adult strangers whom I'd ever encountered before him. He was always incredibly engaging, never superficial, and invariably he was intellectually stimulating. His joining our family became an immediate and unequivocal acceptance. I recall my grandfather, Michael, especially loved him. He even adopted him in a sweet official-looking letter after Philip's mother passed. I will forever remember Philip greeting me, "Hi, Michael," in his sweet, soft, charming Southern accent. As I said when I toasted him on his 70th birthday, at this age of 6 when we first met, I became fascinated by his champion Swiss Army knife, clocking in at what seemed to be about 10 pounds. He carried these behemoth knives with him everywhere, leaving them in airports all over the world as TSA cracked down. The Swiss Army knife came to represent his multifaceted Renaissance talent. He later gifted me my own version at the age of 10. There was a sincere promise that he had kept to me. Not only did I gain a new champion Swiss Army knife, but he had gained my respect and trust for promises kept forever thereafter. I still have the knife at home, something I still use and cherish to this day. Aristotle, in Nicomachean Ethics, posited that living a full life, there are intellectual virtues. They include theoretical wisdom, science, intuitive understanding, practical wisdom, and craft expertise. Aristotle concluded that in essence, the highest value is the pursuit of happiness with knowledge at the center. Philip subscribed to all of these ideals and practiced them each day of his life. He lived a prodigious life. He was always intellectually engaged, an adventurous man through and through. He, in the words of Thoreau, lived deep and sucked out the marrow of life. He too loved and admired nature's beauty and the outdoors. Beethoven said, "Music is the one incorporeal entrance into the higher world of knowledge, which comprehends mankind, but which mankind cannot comprehend." Philip was always, like many of us, chasing for meaning in music. He was a music lover at his core, and many of us here had the pleasure of listening to music with him, be it recorded, live, or playing it with him. But there was always more to these music lessons. We were graced to hear his incredibly insightful perspectives on every composer from Handel to Bach to Wagner to Verdi to even Glass and Adams. He didn't just know their music, but he had read all the unabridged history of each of their lives and would often add colorful historical perspective to a music listening experience. Philip used to send my family tapes of music to listen to in the car as we drove across Europe. These included Handel, Bach, who Philip loved dearly, and Mozart, and many operas as well. I used to secretly listen to these opera tapes when my parents were gone. When I finally graduated from all my studies and moved to Seattle, Joan and Philip visited us often, and we had the pleasure of seeing Wagner's masterpiece together, The Ring, the 17-hour opera, with him, Joan, Donna, and John Hamilton. As Philip said to me so poignantly at the end of that week, it was an appropriately hedonistic week of wine drinking, foodie adventures, and it became a lasting memory together that cemented our and Philip's love for opera. I remember the huge smile on his face after the first intermission of Das Rheingold. He has infected all of us with a magical appreciation for music, and this didn't stop at classical. Philip appreciated many varieties. He later came to sponsor Adam Franzen for both his incredible musical talent, but also his equally matched intellectual sophistication and trusting friendship. Frank Lloyd Wright once said that the mother of art is architecture. Without an architecture of our own, we have no soul of our own civilization. We all came to love and awe and know Philip's artistic talents. His incredible creativity and attention to detail remain unsurpassed. I attribute my own obsession with mid-century and contemporary art and architecture to his direct influence. We had a few occasions to visit some of Frank Lloyd Wright's homes over the years together. One in particular, remember, struck a particular chord for him. And I remember it vividly. The Roby House at the University of Chicago. Philip had always wanted to experience it since his architecture courses in college used it as a template for natural expressive design. While the beautiful home he designed and built represents an even more contemporary style, the home rests within this space naturally, allowing the outside and inside to seamlessly integrate. For those of you joining us afterwards today, I compel you to walk around the house and slowly and carefully, you will see deep inside Philip's mind at every angle, bend upon every wall and surface. A few months ago, my brother and I came to visit Philip here in Houston. At an incredibly challenging moment of intense suffering for him and all of us. During the visit, we spent an inordinate amount of time in the library at his and Joan's home. At one point that weekend, we all sat together in the library with him as well. I always enjoyed my time in the library for two reasons. For one, it was a prominent place where Philip's mind lived. Go and visit. It's a real treasure to behold. As Theodore Roosevelt said, I am part of everything I read. Philip epitomized this philosophy, and the library he designed and lived in is a testament to that notion. Oh, and the second reason that my brother and I spent so much time in the library is the place where Philip stored his scotch. Philip was a firm believer in scotch as a philosophical lubricant. Many of us have been fortunate enough to benefit from these mutual scotch-induced pontifications. Oh, and wine too. Sharing one too many glasses of wine with Philip, as many as I've enjoyed, was often filled with a short history, music, or art lesson, or even better, a discussion of metaphysics and epistemology, and sometimes even politics. Sometimes we agreed, and sometimes we didn't. But again, he always engaged you, and deep down he respected the process of the Socratic method. Philip captivated you. He challenged you, he debated you, he educated you, and he inspired you. And he deeply loved and cared for all of you. So whatever your belief system, your cultural connection to death, you know that Philip's immortality lives with you and with all of us. In the conversations we've had with him, in the masterpieces he's made, and that he's always with us at the intersection of our mind and being. It was only fitting that the last book he was reading before he left us was a history of the French Revolution, probably the third or fourth on the subject he'd read. Philip always strived to a deeper understanding of the world and the people around him. Like Marie Curie eloquently once said, nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. We love you, Philip, and today we celebrate the renaissance you brought to each and every one of our hearts and minds. We all take part of his mind with us. Immortal he is in this transfer of joy we had with him, the love he gave us, the art he produced, and the thirst for knowledge he brought us.
Like maybe some of you, I got to know Philip through Joan. Joan and I worked together. We became friends. And then pretty quickly, as I'll read, we became friends with Philip. This is a letter to Philip. You're older than me when I came to know you late in your life, but you immediately struck me as a person, though older, was full of vitality, full of life, as they say. The sense of having a full life was confirmed to me over time when you laughed and did not deny the stories, such as the episodes of your juvenile delinquency, things like lighting fires in the fireplace with a blowtorch, riding the motorcycles, perilous moments, flying suspect small aircraft to exotic locations, on and on. We really enjoyed all the stories that we heard over dates and dinner. I was entertained very much and enjoyed hearing those funny stories, so many others, but secretly I wished I was with you back then. Instead, I was resigned to be with you at a much later station in life. You are now a refined man. You inspired me with your skill as a designer and a builder, your love and knowledge of the arts, and at times the opposite, it seemed, as when you were younger. You would kindly and gently point out things to me, like one time at my construction site that I was doing in my spare time, something was unsafe. You were wise and insightful with comments like that. You also showed me something about living that full life while stricken with an illness that eventually took you. You were always a delight to be with. I never fully accepted missing out knowing you as a younger man. And yes, it was painful and wonderful to more deeply love you and Joan as you both began to deal with your various life-threatening conditions. Also, the extremely difficult decision to get a transplant and the time when you realized the lung had its expiration date. One of the first dates, at the end of this first date, you took us to this house you were in the throes of completing in Southampton. It's a part of Houston, very nice area of Houston. Perhaps during the dinner, our comments made you suspect that we would be interested. Or maybe you were just justifiably proud of the fine house you had constructed with so much detail, as we've been sort of hearing. It was so obvious it was a labor of love. As we entered the house, we were immediately in touch with both the beauty and the quality of the home. It wasn't yours home, but it was someone else's. I never said this to my wife, Benny, but at that moment, I think we both fell in love with you. Just as Joan and many others have, we could see all the things that you put into this house. You toured us through it. You pointed out the details. Of course, we were overwhelmed. There were so many things to see. We could clearly see the amazing house was a representation of you. Its design, its awareness of context, scale, colors, fine woods, materials, the timelessness of your crafting that you had executed. I'll never look at a piece of bird's eye maple without thinking of you. Back in those first years I knew you, you were healthy. And I'd sometimes see you walking around Montalbano Lumberyard, and I'd wonder to myself, what inspiring project were you working on? But I would often let you pass because you seemed so contently focused on getting your materials. We had time, I must have thought. Surely we'll catch up when we go out on one of our dinner dates or to the symphony or maybe to the opera or an art opening. There were so many things we could do with you. More recently, I was working on a restoration project. I began to think this time how much I would enjoy showing you what I was working on, and maybe you would give me some guidance. I called you for a recommendation for a brick mason. I knew you were preoccupied with the difficult project of your declining health. I imagined by some miracle you'd be available to me. I thought maybe this also would produce a boost in your vitality. You didn't respond. I also knew that was a possibility. Shortly afterwards, we came over for one of our usual dates with you and Joan. At this time, though, we were doing it at the house, which was fine with us, of course. The house is amazing, and Joan's cooking is out of this world. I made no mention of the Mason referral, but later that night you brought it up. You apologized that you couldn't call me back, and you told me it wouldn't be easy to get a recommendation. I had already noticed how uncomfortable things were, how hard it was you to do just ordinary, everyday things. Your time was running out. You successfully communicated to me in your direct and gentle way that you were focused on other tasks that you had in the time that was left. I had a bit of regret for not stopping you more frequently at the lumberyard. In the last months and years, you became ill and then very tired. It was hard to see life narrowing for such an energetic and fun person to be with. You were doing less. You always did so much, but your quick wit, sharp mind, interesting perspective was all still intact. Though you were confined to the home pretty much, we would jump at a chance to see what projects you were still doing, such as redesigning things in the house, rebuilding stuff at the house, or what subjects, books, art, music that you were thinking about. You were such a doer and a thinker all along. Or maybe hear an amusing new tale that we had not heard before, such as going to lunch with Dominic DeMille. Even the music selection today, I'm learning something new. Some of the composers I know, some I don't know very well. You already knew them on a much deeper level, a level that I'll have to work towards. You're gone now. I'll have to finish my construction project or future projects on my own. I'll have to broaden my appreciation for the arts, develop skill as a builder without you. I'll continue to imagine stopping you to chat at the lumberyard. Me, Benny, and Joan will continue to have dates. We will have fine food, delicious wine, tell those funny stories, but with an empty place at the table and in our hearts.
Hi, so I am one of the other nephews, Michael. For those of you who don't know me, nearly half a lifetime ago, I moved in with Joan and Philip and lived with them for a couple of years while I established myself professionally here in Houston. During that time, I've gotten to know many of you through their generosity, and I count their friends as my friends. So I'm here tonight, or this afternoon, to speak for one of their friends who couldn't join us. So these are the words of Nancy Cook, with whom I've shared many meals and counts as a very good friend. So if you picture me a little bit taller, a lot more blonde, slightly Scandinavian, these range will sound like hers. So how do you capture a person who had so much spirit, such intense curiosity, and amazing warmth and generosity? It's the way Philip would open his front door at the house that he himself creatively designed and built with great craftsmanship, a house so open with so many unexpected vistas. He opened the door, and with the sparkle in his eyes and the joy in his voice upon seeing you, he welcomed you into his home, into a thoughtful conversation, into a caring relationship. It's something I looked forward to in many visits that he and Joan so frequently invited me to join with them. Being a friend of Philip meant that you went on very special journeys that expanded your knowledge, journeys that introduced new perspectives, journeys that gave insights about Philip's deep commitment to his relationships with you and with others, and always with such laughter. Once I remember talking with Philip about French history. Charlemagne's name became part of our conversation. Now, I love the stories about Charlemagne from my years of studying French, but Philip, in contrast to me, was able to place Charlemagne historically, identifying precisely the years of his reign, the confluence of ideas that contributed to Charlemagne's leadership, and the subsequent influences that his reign had on French civilization. Philip opened a window, an expanded world from my vague memory, and gave focus to my very blurry memories. These were moments of delight and moments of joy in our friendship, similar to others privileged to be Philip's friend. Another journey indelibly imprinted in my mind occurred not that long ago in France. Philip was not feeling that well, but he was still curious about learning about French wines. And so Joan arranged with Pascal, this amazing wine connoisseur, to guide us through some of the vineyards and give us a vision of the region and the incredible wines from Pouligny-Montrachet. It was one of those very glorious sunny days with crystal clear blue skies. Suddenly, Pascal had landed us on top of a hilltop overlooking the entire region. Pascal insisted that we all come closer to the edge of the cliff, transporting Philip's chair almost to the brink of the ledge so we could take in the full sweep of the geological history of this incredible wine region that had taken eons to create. Philip's face also revealed the joy he was feeling and his great appreciation for the moment. It was indeed a glorious day, and later we recollected the experience and savored it. What a special friendship to be able to share moments like that with Philip and Joan. As I said to Philip in one of our last lengthy conversations, during which Philip contemplated his life, I said, "Philip, you have nourished my soul." Nancy, like I, am so grateful to have enjoyed many years of friendship with such a special friend who shared so much with so many and did it in such an unassuming way. Philip will both sorely miss you.
This anonymous poem speaks to all of us who have lost someone very, very dear. For our loved ones still have a voice in our minds and in our hearts. Please remember Philip's quiet, dignified voice as you hear these words. The poem is called All Is Well by an unknown author. Death is nothing at all. I have just slipped into the next room. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, we are still. Call me by my familiar name. Talk to me in the easy way you used to speak. Put no difference in your tone and speak not in solemnity or false airs of sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes we shared. Play, smile, think of me. Pray for me. Life still means all it ever meant. Life remains the same as always, with absolute unbroken continuity. I am waiting for you just around the corner, somewhere very near. All is well.
Thank you, Betty. We're now going to hear Erica Nickrantz, and this will be the conclusion, but we'll listen and enjoy. And we want to, on behalf of Joan and her family and the Cowdin family, want to thank you for coming today. And it's been a wonderful occasion, and I didn't have the opportunity to look outside until I sat down, and there's so much life, and it's just like Philip. And Philip and I used to come to Herman Park sometimes for different things, and always fun. And so it's always a memory, and you all are very fortunate in Houston to have such a beautiful facility like this in this regard. Erica, thank you all for coming.